I am here with Enikö Hajas, who is a therapist helping people living abroad. Hi, Enikö, welcome to the Screw Being Unhappy podcast, and I am so excited that you accepted my invitation.
So good morning, Susanna. Yes, I was very excited to try my first podcast with you. We had a conversation before on Instagram. We did a live together, and it was such a natural flow between us that I really look forward to continue our talk.
Yeah, and so let's dive straight in. You were born into a diplomat family in Hungary. You have lived in Vietnam, Italy, Netherlands, and Portugal. And right now, you are a therapist helping people who are abroad, far from their supporting systems, far from their culture. So can you tell us a bit more about your story? How did you become a therapist and how your own personal experience played into all this?
Yes, as you are telling already a bit of the summary of my story, I can hear myself. It is an international story indeed that really shaped my profession, but also my life. And it was kind of natural that I would start working with international people. First, indeed, I grew up in Budapest in Eastern Europe, and then my father got a job in Vietnam. So when I was 14, my first country where I ever arrived outside of my own country was Thailand. So can you imagine me being 14? I've only seen communist Eastern Europe before, and I arrived to Thailand, and it was like, wow, this is just so impressive. The colors, the sounds, the buildings, the busyness, all these different people. So I thought, okay, so this is how the world looks like. And I was so impressed that I knew from now on, I always want to travel and I want to see the world. Later on, my father moved to Rome in Italy. And this was the first time when I visited his office because he used to work for the United Nations. And I can still remember the day when I entered the reception hall of the United Nations, and I could see all those flags from all those countries and all those colorful people coming in their cultural, in their own culture, in their own clothes. And I was so impressed, like, wow, this is amazing that all these different people all work together. So then I decided this is what I want to do. I want to work with international people. And it wasn't a very easy road to then become a therapist because I tried to reach my goal in a different way. I finished economics and I worked on international projects that were financed by the EU, and later on I moved to IT and I went to work for example, the National Airport of the Netherlands. So I was really trying to find this international aspect, but really how I live my life now is actually the best way. Just to tell, so I worked in economics and I worked in IT, but somehow working with the computers, I found the people so much more interesting than the computers. So I realized I wanted to do another study. So when I turned 30, I started actually studying psychology and became a therapist myself. And I combined the two words. So becoming a therapist and using my interest, but also my international experience to translate therapy and mental health problems to not just to a unique person, but also to their cultural identity, where they come from, and translate it to all these special aspects. And that's where that's my favorite puzzle. So that's why I love to do this work. And in the meantime, I worked with 46 different nationalities. So it keeps on challenging me every time.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you on this because I always enjoy traveling and I wanted to explore the world. And I'm so happy I am doing the work which allows me actually to meet people from different culture. Even if I am sitting here in Zambia and not traveling at the moment, I'm still meeting so many people from across the world, and that kind of make me feel like I'm traveling a bit. And because this episode is about therapy, and why I invited you to the podcast is that I wanted to talk about like what is actually therapy, what are the differences between therapy and coaching, and why somebody can realize that, oh, maybe I need a therapist or maybe I need a coach. And even when we are in it, I feel like I have lots of coaches around me. I'm sure you have lots of therapists around yourself. So for when we are in it, it feels like it's something natural. But I think many women, many people still might have that image of therapists like going to some office, lying on a sofa and
Yeah.
talking about childhood. So before we go a bit
Yeah.
deeper, like, can you tell us in your way, like what is therapy, like how is it still lying on the sofa and talking to Dr. Freud, or is it something else actually?
No, that's really, actually it's really important to talk about it. So I like your question. In certain cultures, like look at the US, it's people kind of understand meanwhile what therapy is. But okay, there are many other countries who still think indeed that this is the old-fashioned way of the therapist having his cigar and analyzing you and knowing everything about you and making his assumptions and telling you how you should live your life. So indeed, it's not about the couch anymore, even though I have one. No, it's especially how I practice therapy, but I can tell it about my most of my colleagues. Modern therapy, let's say psychotherapy, is giving a space, a safe space, a warm space, like a warm blanket, where you are allowed to be who you are with all your thoughts and all your emotions. So it's really facilitating um, a setting in which you can dig deep to find your old emotions that are blocking your behavior or old patterns. And you had a question about what is then therapy compared to coaching, or shall we go into that later?
We can go into that later, but I already saw one thing which I like to say. I think coaching and therapy have a lot of in common, but you just mentioned like in therapy, it's like kind of warm space, this comfortable blanket to go and dig deeper into your feelings, your emotions from the past. And then I see coaching, it's more about focusing on future. But I think, I believe both of them actually work with the emotions and the patterns we have developed throughout our life and trying to change it to what actually served us. Am I right?
Yeah, because sometimes it's not even that people don't have their solutions. Sometimes they even know what to do, but they need someone who doesn't judge them, who can pull them up and tell them you can do it. And I guess that's also one of the most important parts of being a coach, right, Susanna?
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, I would say people come to a therapist sometimes with the same complaints that they might go to a coach. I see the difference indeed in approach, but I really think that both are extremely important and they can't be without, to be honest. Or let's say the therapist cannot be without coaching. Maybe the coaching can be without therapy. But I do believe that also coaches need to sometimes look back at the past and understand where certain patterns come from, right? So I believe that there is a huge overlap between coaching and therapy and between the approaches of therapists. I would say that the therapist will help you process old feelings and old emotions, understand them, and help you heal from them. And that's why you can say it's a bit more past oriented. And we say coaching is a bit more present and future oriented, right? Like really holding someone's hand and motivate someone to make those practical steps of change. How someone wants to see their future, how someone wants to live their lives.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably one of the biggest differences.
But yeah, what I see and what I hear, what you are saying also, like what is the most important in both is actually looking at the old patterns we have, the old patterns of thinking, old patterns of behavior, because if we are not happy now, like we probably created some patterns in the past, we are not conscious about them, right? But if we want to have different results for future, we need to analyze it and kind of change it to thoughts or beliefs that serve us. Like the simple example can be, I can grab it from my own life, like my entire life I was thinking I'm ugly because that's what I was told, that's how I was brought up, and I lived my life thinking I will never find a boyfriend, I'm not pretty enough, and all these things. And then if you really want to change your future, then you need to like go deeper, and here that's maybe the method will be different in therapy versus coaching, but you really need to see like, do I still want to believe this or not?
Yeah, that's very fair indeed. And I believe that with coaching you can get really far. And when do we need therapy? Like now you told an example about yourself, let's tell an example about myself. For example, I went to, because of course I'm becoming a therapist, we went to therapy too. So I bring the complaint, okay, I would like to have a dog, my daughter would like to have a dog, but I'm afraid of dogs. So where does it come from? I mean, how come I just suddenly am afraid of dogs? So you see, I could do it with some coaching, with some exposure, and it could be help. But let's be honest, the deeper reason of it is that I had a trauma with a dog when I was a kid. So what therapy then does is really goes back, for example, with EMDR, it's a wonderful tool and helps me process that old trauma. And by processing that old trauma, the next step is that I can coach myself how to cope around dogs, how to get used to perhaps having one in my environment. So coaching is probably before and after therapy, and therapy just digs deeper to uncover the deeper emotional reason for certain patterns.
Yeah, actually, like when you are talking about this, I have yet another example, because I live abroad. I live thousands of kilometers from the Czech Republic, and since ever I started flying, I hated it. And so I never liked flying, but I always kind of went on the plane. I survived the trip, but it was something like unpleasant. And now when my son got born, I got like more anxious, and for me really flying, it's like kind of risk. I don't know if I will survive it. I'm like me, I'm scared the plane will fall down. So actually this, I believe there is something deeper, like in the past, or I don't know, this life, previous lives, I don't know. But actually, like next week, I am having a session with a therapist to look at this, because this is when I see like, this is when coaching is not helping, because I think it's something deeper. That's exactly as you said with the having trauma with dogs. So that's when therapy helps. And in my case, with the flying. So I'm actually really looking forward to that session with the therapist. It will be my first one ever. I'm planning to maybe make another podcast episode about the experience, how it will go.
Nice.
But I think that's important point to mention, that this is the difference between the coaching and therapy. And since you
sorry to interrupt you, but it's a very good example.
You can finish, then I can ask the next question.
Yes, because it's first, it starts with a behavior pattern, like a cognitive problem. And you realize, even though you try to change it, or maybe you already try to coach therapy, or you read about it, but it still doesn't change. So then indeed therapy can help you to process those fears that are deeper. So therapy is not only for past traumas, maybe also traumas, but also to process fears. So there are certain tools in therapy that can help with those.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, to experience it on my own. And Enikö, I wanted to ask, since you mentioned you work with over 40 nationalities in your 13 years of practice, 13 or 16, sorry.
It's even 17.
17, okay. So you have a huge experience, you have met so many people. What are the most common challenges you help your clients with?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. What would be the most common? At this moment, I work with a lot of expats, and so you can say these are the expat challenges, but typically what people bring to therapy is sometimes just the upper layer. So they come with loneliness, don't know how to socialize or how to date, how to integrate in the local culture, how to keep their own identity. We talked about that last time together. Or sometimes they realize, finally, now that I'm at peace, I have my career, now I want to go back and understand things that happened in my past. So generally also work-life balance, you know, people, I mean, especially expats have a lot of problems with burnouts. Cross-cultural relationships. So I would say the problems that come with are pretty general, that expats in general can experience. I guess that with the same topics they might also arrive to you, Susanna. What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually about to say that it's very similar, the topics that arrive to me. And that's now when there is a woman listening and she's asking, oh, but do I need a therapist? Do I need a coach? So how do you know, or when do you know that now this is the time when you could actually benefit from hiring a therapist?
Therapist or a coach, that's adding. Yes, that's an interesting one, because I do believe that people in general can solve their own problems and can deal with their own stress. And especially these days, there is so much social media, podcasts, self-help books available that you can get really far. Now, when do we go actually really to a professional is when we get stuck in the loop of thoughts, or when we are trying to change, but we realize you're not getting there. You're too lame to make the changes, or just we know the steps, but we just don't know how to start. So that's when, or sometimes when we don't even know that we have a problem, but we have all these physical symptoms. So we are tired, anxious, stressed, empty. So you can't really define what it is, but you feel that you're not doing well. So those moments are good to go to a professional to uncover what's the underlying problem, or to the coach to help you actually make that first step. So when we feel that we need to be in an environment when there is someone who does not judge us, who, as we just said before, who can give us this warm blanket, who doesn't know even our circumstances, doesn't know who we are outside of that practice. So this person will not be judgmental, will not have feelings for us even. Because, you know, friends and family also can be there for you, but they have feelings for you. So they always have a bit their own agenda. Now, professional coach or therapist does not have her own agenda. So she can really just be there fully for you.
Yeah. And I like you mentioned that we can definitely 100% solve our problems alone. And I was always the kind of person, I think it really also depends on the culture you come from, right? Like we both come from Europe, which used to be communist at some point. And even me, I was born a year before the communism ended, so I didn't really experience it. But I believe it's really like my parents, they were brought up, they lived during the regime. So it's really, I think it depends on the culture you come from. So my point was that when I was growing up, there was no going to therapist or no going to coach. Like I had to deal with my problems alone. And I am happy to say I always managed. but sometimes it was really in a painful way, doing crazy stuff to solve my problems. And so I think there is very fine line between like finding the balance, like where we are confident and strong and capable to solve our challenges ourselves. And then when we cross the line, when we actually could benefit from a help, but we keep still doing it ourselves and not getting anywhere, like being in a circle stuck and not just getting anywhere. So it's what I wanted to ask was next question was actually there is sometimes this notion that we should sort our problems alone, like we don't need help from anybody. And I think this can be stronger in certain cultures than in others. But like, what would be your thoughts about this when somebody feels stuck, like they're dealing with the similar problems like years and years, and they still feel like, I can do it alone, I am fine, I don't need a therapist, I don't need a coach. What are your thoughts about this?
Oh, that's an interesting question you ask. Yeah, there can be a few reasons, but the most important to investigate then is you might have a reason not to change. We call it the benefit of the sickness. In Dutch, de ziektewinst, which means sometimes people have a reason to maintain their complaints. Maybe somewhere that thing that we want to change, actually don't want to change because somewhere it's also comfortable. And sometimes that comfort we hate it, but at the same time, this is our safety. This is what we learn to survive it. So our negative patterns are sometimes also our survival skills. So let's not forget, we don't want to get rid of our survival skills. We need them. At least we think we need them. We don't, but somewhere in our life, we needed it. And it takes some time and braveness to realize, one, we don't need it anymore. And two, there can be something else coming instead. But to build up that new safety and that new trust of a new pattern, a new behavior, that's not easy. So I guess this is why people get stuck, and this is where they need a professional, a coach or a therapist who can help them feel safe to actually make that step and change. You recognize that, Susanna?
Yeah, and I so appreciate that you mentioned that some behaviors we have them for a reason. And I really agree with this, like that any behavior, any pattern, even if it might seem from outer perspective completely crazy or nonsense or unhealthy, from the person perspective, it's a result of something and it's making sense for that person as a reaction, maybe something happening in the childhood or some kind of reaction the way the person was brought up. So even like us, as like we are viewing the person, maybe we are in a relationship with a person, we said, this is so unhealthy, why he is doing it this way, it doesn't make any sense. From his or her perspective, it makes perfect sense. And I think when we realize this, like in a relationship, in a romantic relationship and in general, it's kind of when we realize that every person has that baggage from life and they created strategies. And then I think we start feeling more empathy and love, and it's a way to solve the conflicts.
Yeah, you're totally right. I would like to add one more thing that I had to think of. There can be, for example, another reason why people get stuck. They kind of know that they should live their life different and they are really annoyed by their patterns. However, they might not feel worthy enough to, they might not feel that they deserve the change. So if you're missing this fundamental self-worth, because maybe you were not loved, maybe it was told, you got conditional love, it was told to you that you don't deserve attention, you don't deserve care. So if you grow up with that feeling, even if you want to change anything in your life, you will not succeed. So then that's the first step also with a coach or therapist, to learn to love yourself and learn that you do deserve the change.
And you mentioned another point which I would like to add up on is that, and I forgot what I wanted to say. Damn it.
Okay.
What was it? Yeah. So what I wanted to add is that we all have blind spot, and when we work with a therapist or a coach, this helps us to see the blind spot, because we live certain way, like 20, 30, 40 years. That's how we always live, and it's kind of logical that there are things we don't see. And once there is a coach, and as you mentioned, the coach is not personally involved in your story. The coach is there to hold your space, to support you, to believe in you, but it's not like bringing all these like personal things. Then it can be really eye-opening to see like, wow, I haven't noticed this.
Very, very, very good point. Thank you, Susanna. Really good. Yes, indeed. It happens to us too, therapists, coaches. We are also humans. The same thing happens to us. Sometimes we have blind spots and we don't realize things. So you really need another person to confront you. Let's call it a loving confrontation, but that it's really necessary.
Enikö, what lifts you up when you feel down, when you feel all sorts of negative emotions, and when you feel like you just want to lie in the bed, eat chocolates, and watch romantic movies?
Yes, that's a good question. Because yes, indeed, we therapists and coaches, we can also feel just as down and small as a little kid, and just feel just as the same as our clients, and just hide under the blanket and feel sorry for ourselves and see no way out. So it's a very human emotion, a very human feeling to feel hopeless and miss someone and hope that someone will come and solve our problem. So in that moment, I guess one of the most important is I allow myself to feel like that. Indeed, just stay under the blanket, just go for a sleep or cry a big and complain to a friend. And then to lift me up, it really helps me if I put myself in a different role. So let's say I'm down because I felt down because of something happened with a friend, and I try to quickly look up a role in which I can feel my value again. And if I can feel my value again, for example, take my kids to the cinema, or have a nice conversation with another friend, or just go and work. So feel myself in a role where I remember who I am and remember that I am actually capable. So that feeling of capable will help me to forgive myself for the mistake that I have made in another role. So basically activating myself. It can also be just going for sports or do something for myself to really feel this self-care, self-love, but feel something that I actually can do, help me to get out of the incapable passive role.
I love this, and I think I kind of never thought of it in the words you use, like to change the role, because I often say just start doing something different, like completely different. Like you mentioned the exercise, but I really like how you mention and use the word role, like that. If maybe I felt that something as a business lady, then I do something as an amazing wife. And like this shift, I think it's a great tip, and I will also share it in the show notes so women who are listening can have it at their fingertips and they can try it out next time. And another question which I want to ask you is, if there is one thing you would like the women who are listening to this podcast or watching the interview on the YouTube, if there is one thing you would want them to do now as a result of listening, as an action now, as an action to do something about their future, what would that be?
All right, so let's say it's morning and you're ready for your day. You just listen to this podcast and you would like to activate yourself. So why not sit down, take that coffee or tea, and take a moment of time out. Exactly, I have it too. And take this little acknowledgement. Let's say give yourself 3 acknowledgements, something you are grateful or you're satisfied in your life. And give yourself that hug, that love that you achieved it, that you did it. Observe how you feel. Maybe you feel, hey, but something is missing. So give attention also to that. So what is missing? What exactly needs to be done? And how come that has not been done yet? So start with the acknowledgement and then take it into a reflection. Like a little mini mindful moment in which you turn your attention inside, but you start from this loving, caring position, and then you make some action notes.
And thank you for sharing this. And I am definitely with you on this. And recently I had a coaching session with one of my clients. She's amazing. We have been together as a coachee and coach for 1.5 years. So I have seen her journey. And we were coaching on productivity. And this is like something what came out of the coaching was we don't have to start our morning diving directly into the computer or rushing to the work. That's the way we were taught to do it, I think most of us. But why not to take 1 hour or 10 minutes, or in her case, like she said now, like she starts working at 11. Why not, if it works for you and it can give you so much more space? And I think it will make really huge difference if you start your day from that space of feeling grateful, as you just said, or like kind of reflecting on what's not feeling right, what could be better. And when we start from that space, like our energy is different, like throughout the day. So I'm really grateful that you shared this, and I hope that our amazing listeners are going to give it a chance, because it can feel we have no time, we have to send the kids to school, we have to start working, we have to prepare this and that. But often this actually, it feels counterintuitive, but it gives us more energy to do other things. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
And Enikö, where our listeners can find you?
All right. Where can they find me? You mean on media, social media?
On social media, or if they can find you even physically. I believe that you have practice not only online, but physically. If somebody heard this episode and they're like, oh, maybe I need to process this fear, or I need to process these emotions, and I think I might need a therapist, maybe I can talk to Enikö. So how does it look like if somebody wants to reach out to you? Where they find you? What is the process? So maybe you can tell us a bit more about it.
First of all, you can find me on Instagram. That's where we also met each other with Susanna. Coincidentally, today I'm starting a new series, which is going to be called The Home Therapist, in which I'm going to give tips and tricks to people to try to tackle their own stress, their own issues on their own. So try with that. And next to me, you find so much more inspiration on Instagram. After that, you can find me on my website, which is Enikö Hajas psychotherapy.com. And how it goes is that you can book on my website an initial call. In the initial call, which is free of charge, it's a half-an-hour call in which you discover what you would like to work on. Then you can also indicate if you like to work online or if you like to work in one of my practices. I'm located in 2 countries at this moment. I see people in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, and in Lisbon, in Portugal. So you can choose your location. You can choose if it should be an online session. And in this first talk, I will explain you how it works.
Okay, awesome. And I really, whoever is listening, I just really want to say, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's super important, is that you don't have to do it alone. It's so much easier if you have a therapist, coach by your side, and especially it's a person who doesn't judge you, who is there for you. And as I think it was Rich Litvin in his book saying, it's so beneficial even if you would talk to a lamppost. just talking and getting the things out. So imagine if you have a real person in front of you who can actually, unlike the lamppost, talk back to you. So it's really amazing.
And especially a dedicated person like you and me, who we are passionate about our work. We will be passionate to help people. We love our jobs, so we are really there for you, for people outside. And also because a therapist, we already mentioned the benefits and the therapist and the coach's benefits, but also one of them is showing an example. Like sometimes you just need to learn a new behavior, a new way of treating yourself. And that love that we give to our clients, you as a client can learn to give to yourself. So that's also our example function.
Yeah, thank you, Enikö, for being here. Thank you for accepting the invitation, and it was my pleasure. And I hopefully see you next time.
Yes, it was also my pleasure. Thank you so much for the inspiration talk, and I also look forward.